All right, welcome everyone to today's workshop, Enhancing Research with AI Applications, focusing on literature reviews. Adam, would you like to introduce yourself?
Sorry, I was closing some other screens. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Adam Wilson from the Department of Anatomy and Cell Biology. I am one of the primary anatomists for the medical college, but then I also conduct medical education research. So many of the examples that we'll give you today will be in the area of medical education research, but of course, these examples will be highly applicable to clinical and basic science research as well.
Thanks, Adam. And I'm Emily Rush. I'm an AI education specialist with Fiddy. And thank you all for joining us today. We encourage questions. If you have them, feel free to unmute yourselves or add your questions to the chat, and we'll take a moment to address them when they arise. I want to get started by talking about our learning objectives for today. So by the end of today's session, you'll be able to do the following. First of all, to differentiate between various AI-powered tools for literature searching, mapping, synthesis, and organization in academic research. You will be able to analyze the potential benefits and the risks, limitations, and challenges of using AI-powered tools for conducting literature reviews. And you'll be able to develop a personal strategy for trialing and applying AI-assisted tools for literature reviews to enhance efficacy or efficiency, we'll say, while maintaining scholarly integrity. And I guess I should back up for a second and say that initially when we sent out the invitation for today's workshop, it was going to be more comprehensive. And in the planning and discussion of this workshop, we decided that it would be more beneficial to break it up over the course of 3 workshops. So just to reiterate, today's workshop will be focusing on literature reviews. All right, so before we really turn in greater depth to a discussion of AI augmented literature reviews, I first want to contextualize generative AI technology. And I'm going to do it in a little bit different way. I'm not going to talk necessarily about how AI works. What I'd like to do instead is talk about AI in terms of its implications for academia and academic research. And I'm going to start by talking about AI and this idea of generative AI as part of a 4th industrial revolution. This idea has been put forth by the World Economic Forum, amongst others. And basically, the implication of this is that the World Economic Forum and others have posited the idea that generative AI is analogous to various technologies like steam power or electricity. And so as such, being analogous to these other technologies, that AI has the potential to optimize existing processes while enabling new capabilities in a variety of sectors. And I give you a few examples on the slide. For example, in the field of medicine, we already see that AI can help enhance diagnostic accuracy. More broadly in the sciences, it's already accelerating hypothesis generation. And I would argue that although these impacts might seem gradual and even subtle right now, that over time, I think we will start to see shifting existing practices, especially with regard to academic research processes. Now, I think it's fairly safe to say already that generative AI is already embedded in a number of the technologies that we might be using for research today. So from Open Evidence to Scopus, AI is part of these existing platforms. And similarly, you might be using other tools as part of your research processes, like Airtable, that also has AI features. And I'm just curious, if you feel like it, throw in the chat and let us know if you're already using AI as part of your research processes, or if there are specific tools or platforms that have embedded AI features. Okay, so just a little bit more generally about AI and what it might how it might lend itself to academic research. And I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the opportunities that AI may provide in terms of academic research. And I want to start with financial aspects, especially with regard to open access tools. And these are tools that are becoming increasingly more prevalent. We see institutions like Stanford, Berkeley, really working, MIT researchers also working to put out open access tools. And these are beneficial because they can help increase accessibility to research platforms. In terms of time and cognition, we can see, and I'll discuss in a moment in greater detail, how AI can help reduce time on repetitive tasks. And by doing so, it can help researchers focus in greater depth on creative thinking. Likewise, AI has the potential to increase productivity by enhancing research quality and depth. And finally, AI lends itself to, maybe we might say, an evolution of disciplinary standards by opening up different possibilities for interdisciplinary collaboration and innovation. And here I'm just going to discuss, more specifics of what we call AI's affordances. And these are really AI's capabilities as they pertain to research. And these are actually specific examples that I found of ways that individuals have used AI to enhance their research processes. And the first is to return to this idea of the pace of research. And a recent example came to light in which an astrophysicist was able to complete 10 months of doctoral coding work with 6 prompts with ChatGPT-01, which is the most recent model. And that's pretty exciting, I think. Likewise, in the field of business consulting, a recent study by Del Acqua et al. Uncovered that AI significantly boosted consultant productivity with a notable 25% increase in speed for various tasks. And this was evaluated by human experts as well. In that same study, we also see evidence of increasing quality of research. So once again, with this Boston Consulting Group study by Del Acqua et al., the researchers found out that AI could also significantly boost consultants' output with a 40% quality increase for tasks, and especially when they used AI and had training with AI. Likewise, there is the potential to increase novelty in certain fields of research. And an example comes from the field of natural language programming. This is a study in which the researchers found that AI-generated ideas were proven to be more novel than human expert ideas, although slightly weaker in terms of feasibility. Nevertheless, more novel. And then again, in terms of novelty, this is somewhat anecdotal, but it's certainly tempting to think that AI could get us to this point someday. This is from the field of immunology. A researcher posting on Twitter, or I guess it's called X now, indicated that he's testing a novel cancer immunotherapy based on a collaboration with ChatGPT. So this idea that increasingly there's the potential for AI to be a cognitive partner in academic work. We're not likely there yet, but maybe we'll get there soon. Okay, so I gave you all sort of the optimistic view of what AI might do, but I would be remiss if I didn't pause just for a minute and talk about some of the realities of working with AI. And I'm going to do that through the lens of something called the jagged frontier. And this is a term that Ethan Mollick, who is a noted expert on AI, and he writes prolifically about AI, he refers to the jagged frontier to describe what he says is the uneven and unpredictable boundaries of what AI can and can't do well. And I know from talking to some of you on this call that you've definitely encountered this idea of the jagged frontier, that there are things that you fully expect AI to be able to do, and then are unfortunately somewhat bitterly disappointed when it can't do what you want. Some good examples of this are coding. So AI excels at coding. There are many discussions already about will programmers be irrelevant at some point. AI also excels at textual synthesis, especially synthesizing large bodies of works that are harder for humans to do, and it also identifies themes quite well within large bodies of text. At the same time, these same very systems can struggle with things like producing accurate information all of the time, and much to our frustration, especially for researchers, it doesn't always, or they don't always return accurate citations. And despite the work of the immunologist on the previous slide, it's safe to say that AI cannot yet consistently identify gaps in research. So again, this jagged frontier exists, It's something that you want to keep in mind as you experiment with AI in general, and of course, as part of your research processes. Okay, now I gave you a little bit of overview of some general considerations regarding generative AI. And so what I would like to do now is introduce what we'll be talking about in part today, which is an AI enhanced research framework. And together we've identified 6 different stages of the research process, beginning with brainstorming, followed by searching, synthesizing, organizing, analyzing, and feedback. And today we'll be focusing on the 3 areas inside the orange triangle. And now I'm going to hand over the presentation to Adam, who's going to say a little bit more about the allure of AI-assisted literature reviews.
All right, thank you, Emily. Well, as AI continues to evolve, there is going to be a lot of potential for its use across various aspects of the research process. So for this presentation, we really want to highlight generative AI's potential for literature reviews specifically. I see many researchers on the call, and so this is not new to you, of course. You are well aware that the scientific literature is growing significantly, even on a daily basis. And of course, the more that literature grows, the more challenging and the more time-consuming it becomes to efficiently synthesize all of the extant literature. And so enter the role of AI, whereby these AI systems, for literature reviews in particular, may offer us a lot of time savings potential in a number of different ways. So let me just give you some examples. For one, AI is making it a lot easier to conduct literature searches using natural language. Instead of using complex combinations of Boolean operators and keywords and mesh terms, etc., AI has now the potential to help us run high-level searches that librarians have historically helped us with, all right? Hear me closely. I'm not suggesting librarians will be out of a job, okay? But I am suggesting that their typical modus operandi by which they're operating may be changing, all right? They might be now shifting toward using AI systems in a very different way than they had been trained to do searches in the past. AI can also save time during the study screening process, especially for systematic literature reviews, which I do a lot of. AI can summarize the literature for you, and it can also assist you with article quality assurance checks, and can now also extract article information, which again is thrilling to me because of all the meta-analyses that I do and all the data extraction that we need across a variety of different articles. So of course, every process and every AI system is going to come with limitations. So in putting together this presentation, we found it rather difficult to understand exactly how these proprietary databases are functioning. And we couldn't really tell how they were prioritizing or returning the relevant records. So let that be a caveat as we go through this presentation. And of course, depending on the AI system that you choose and use, the search results may be less precise than other systems. And then finally, I would say that validity spot checks to determine the accuracy of the summaries and the data extractions are still needed at this point. No AI system is perfect. And I don't know about you, but for me, it's sort of a trust level, right? I'm not at the point where I'm ready to fully trust AI with the entirety of my research process when it comes to summarizing or extracting data in particular. Next slide, please, Emily. So for this talk today, our primary goal is to serve as information curators. There are so many AI systems that are currently on the market that it is nearly impossible to keep up with these systems and to understand all of their features and to even figure out which systems might be worth subscribing to. So what we have attempted to do is to do a lot of that legwork for you. We have looked at about 20 different AI systems related to literature reviews. And after exploring these systems, we were able to categorize them into 5 different buckets. So for the remainder of this talk, we're going to discuss these 5 buckets of common features, and we'll also provide 1 or 2 examples of the AI systems within each bucket. And the AI systems that we're going to show you are typically those that we felt were the better systems within each category. So on the screen, notice that underneath each bucket, you have kind of a listing of each of the AI systems that we are going to be discussing within each bucket, or at least an example of one of those. Let me also mention that I have organized these buckets and prioritized them according to what I felt would be their usefulness and according to how likely I would be to use these particular systems within my own research projects and processes. So as a disclaimer, this information, of course, represents my own personal viewpoint, and it represents my own personal research needs. Your opinion, your research needs might differ slightly, in which case you may prioritize some of these systems as being higher for your needs than what I'm prioritizing them as. So before we go on, let me just give you a general overview of what each of these buckets entails, and then we're going to give you some examples from each bucket. So here, this first bucket, bucket 1, is what I'll call a miscellaneous bucket because it has kind of a hodgepodge of a couple of different AI systems. These systems are ones that will prioritize and sort articles for you. And then the second system that I'll discuss is one that will start to write a research paper and will recommend articles as the writing process unfolds. For bucket 2, these are the AI systems that are capable of searching for interrelated papers, but the caveat is you often need to start with a seminal paper in order for this type of search to be productive. I don't know about you, but in the research that I do, I don't always start with a seminal paper. I don't know what the seminal papers are necessarily, but I do have a topic in mind. And so if that's your approach, then this particular type of system within this bucket may not be the best for you. The third bucket is going to be systems that only summarize uploaded articles, and we'll take a look at some of the quality of those summary outputs. Next slide, please, Emily. Bucket 4 is going to represent the AI systems that search for multiple articles, but they can only summarize one article at a time based on the uploads of the articles that you do and the prompting that you give each system. And then lastly, bucket 5 is the bucket that I've given the highest priority to, if you will, because this represents AI systems that search for and simultaneously summarize multiple articles at one time. Not only are they doing both of those features at once, but a lot of these systems also have what I call drill down features that allow you to really get into the details of each paper in a very conversational way using the system. Okay, so that's kind of the overview of where we're headed. So now I would like to give you some very specific examples of each of these types of systems within each bucket. So we'll start with bucket 1. Next slide, please. Again, bucket 1 represents a miscellaneous bucket whereby these systems are tangentially related to literature reviews, but they don't conduct reviews in a typical manner that you would think of. So the first system I want to describe to you is called ASReview. So ASReview is a free open source system designed for large systematic reviews. Once the records are uploaded into the system, the AI assistant is going to take all those records and it's going to take your input into consideration. So for example, the goals of your project that you've entered into the prompt. The AI assistant is also going to take into consideration how you are including and excluding certain studies. So this is really for the screening process. So not only is AI thinking about your goals that you've entered, but it's also looking at your inclusion and exclusion patterns as you sift through and screen all these records. And based on that information, the AI assistant will then continuously resort and will reprioritize all of the remaining records so that those that are the most relevant to your study purpose will rise to the very top so that you can review those first. So in theory, what this allows is after you get through about 1/3 to a half of the records, all of the remaining records become far less relevant to your study or irrelevant entirely. And so it prevents you from having to screen the second half of all the records that were identified. So it makes the process far more efficient. Now, if you're going to conduct a systematic review, instead of using this particular system, I instead would recommend that you use Covidence for a couple of reasons. One, in my opinion, Covidence is the best on the market for systematic reviews because it has a lot of different features to it. It has this exact same AI embedded feature within it already, whereby the AI system sorts these articles and prioritizes them for you. Not only that, it's nice that Rush already has a subscription to Covidence, and so you have free access to that, and you can find Covidence through the Rush Library webpage. Okay, the next system is called Jenny AI. Jenny AI is an interesting system that takes a topical prompt and it starts writing a research paper with just a few sentences at a time for you. And so as you see here in the screen capture on the right, as the system recommends what to write, it simultaneously is also recommending the literature citations. So you can see sort of in that gray font, one of the citations that it's recommending is Solovac 2019. Now, as I was working with this system, I'll be honest, I didn't like it so much. I mean, chances are you're going to be unfamiliar with the citations that it's suggesting. And so in using this system, it felt like I was forced to trust the system without actually knowing anything about the paper that it was citing. I didn't know if it was accurate or not. And so I don't know about you, but when I write my research manuscripts, I really want to have that confidence of knowing that what I put on the page is relevant, is accurate, and is worth citing. And as an experienced researcher, this system really did not give me that confidence that I was looking for because I didn't know how relevant or accurate any of the information was. I would have had to have done a really deep dive into every single citation to really get that confidence I was looking for. Conversely, though, you can imagine probably very appealing to novice researchers, maybe even some of our students who have never written a research paper before, because as I have indicated here, it's going to initiate the writing process for you, and it's going to just recommend as much as you want it to, and you can also, of course, make some modifications to the topic so it will recommend different things. But nonetheless, you can imagine this would be very appealing to very novice researchers. And I don't know how you feel about this, but I have a lot of mixed feelings here because part of my role is to oftentimes help to train novice researchers in how to conduct an academic writing process. And in my mind, as an educator and researcher, one of the important roles or important pieces of the process is really to allow the student to struggle, to figure out what the outline should look like, what topics they should write about, how they should go about finding the literature that is relevant, etc. And so by using this type of a system, especially for a novice individual, it's taking a lot of that struggle away, which for them seems like a good thing at face value. But for me as the educator, I just have to question whether or not it could be doing more harm than good. All right, next slide, please.
All right, so now we're moving on to bucket 2. And as Adam said a little bit earlier, these are some of the kinds of tools that you might use for visual mapping of relationships between different scholarly works. And often they'll show things like timeline views, author networks, and the screenshot that you see on the right, if we were in that program, it does offer interactive exploration so that the user could click on the different nodes within the network and receive more detailed information. As Adam said, many of these tools require starting with a seed paper or seminal work. The particular tool shown on the right called Undermine.ai it does not require a seed paper. It just generates an author and timeline map when one submits their query. And in terms of, I think Adam and I both talked about this particular kind of tool, and I think it really varies according to your research preferences, whether or not it might be useful. Myself, as someone who researches post ChatGPT AI, timeline networks are not particularly helpful. Author networks might be helpful, but this is not a tool that is necessarily useful for me, but it might be useful for you. And I think now we're going to turn to a discussion of AI-generated article summaries with Adam.
Yeah, and I don't want you to feel like we're speeding through all of this. So let me just pause for just a moment. Any comments, reflections on bucket 1 and bucket 2 first? Any questions as well? Feel free to either unmute yourself or use the chat. Okay, I'll take the pregnant pause as indication that we should carry on. So in the case of bucket 3, this bucket now represents AI systems that only focus on generating summaries of research articles. The 2 systems that we explored were both Coral AI and Scholarcy. The screenshots that you see here on the screen before you were taken from Scholarcy. Scholarcy's summaries do require a lot of scrolling, if you will, due to the formatting of the outputs that are generated. So for some, that might be less appealing. Scholarly does have a library structure whereby you can take all the articles that you have uploaded and you can organize them and store them in the content libraries within the Scholarcy system. And for whatever reason, just a note, Scholarcy uses the term flashcard to refer to the articles that you upload into the system. And when you upload an article to Scholarcy, as you can see in the screen capture on the far left of the screen, you can not only upload the article in that kind of faded purple box, but then below the box, there are some options that you can select from. For example, you can select the number of key findings that you want the summary to return. You can also select the length of the summaries. So here as an example, it says a word count of 400. There are some features here where you can sort of customize the outputs and the style of output that you want to see. You can also have Scholarcy explain articles to you according to either your reading level and or your research level. So it will, of course, give you more detailed information about the article, more technical information, the higher the level you set it at. And the structured summaries that you see here on the screen were taken from a research paper of mine. It was a bit of a technical paper on the topic of exploring the validity of script concordance tests. And I will say, much to my surprise, the summary output here was very accurate, and I found it easy to digest. I will say, though, that these summaries are quite long, and so I'm not sure that I would really save much time reading these summaries compared to just reading the paper directly. So, of course, I would probably, in retrospect, reduce the word count for the summary outputs so it's a little bit more manageable instead of them being so verbose. All right, next slide, please. Okay, here's bucket 4, and this bucket represents AI systems that can recommend research articles based on topical conversational prompts. These systems can also summarize and upload articles one at a time. Sorry, let me say that again. They can summarize articles that you upload one at a time. Of the systems that we're discussing today, these are probably the ones that are most familiar to you. These are the big names of Microsoft Copilot and ChatGPT and Claude Sonnet, etc. All right, so you've perhaps played with these and piloted these already. So here for this example in front of you, I wanted to put ChatGPT 4o to the test. So to do that, I asked it to search the literature for the 5 most recent scholarly publications, both meta-analyses and systematic reviews, on the topic of the efficacy of educational escape rooms within higher education. And it spit back 5 articles to me, of which only 4 made the screen capture. Now, I would like to draw your attention to the article that I've highlighted here in yellow. The title of this article is Unlocking Knowledge, a meta-analysis assessing the efficacy of educational escape rooms in health sciences education. Now, that sounds like an excellent article. And I assure you, it is an excellent article because it's one that I wrote. However, there are some caveats here. The problem is that none of these authors that are listed were actually authors on this paper. In addition, we just published this paper in 2024, not in 2021. So I use this as an example to say that even in the present day, it appears that ChatGPT is still struggling to return accurate citations of real scientific works. So this is simply a reminder that our AI systems are not perfect yet, and some still have some flaws in returning inaccurate information. So do be dubious at times and critical of what you're seeing, and do your validity checks as needed. All right, next slide, please. So given that our lit search test did not fare very well for ChatGPT, I was also interested in knowing and determining, well, how good are the summaries from these systems that the AI is generating? So for this, I did a mini experiment. I used two of my top cited research papers. First, I pulled key quotes from each abstract that, in my opinion, represented the paper's major findings. And those quotes are shown here on the screen in the brown font. Next, I uploaded the systems for them to summarize in 1 to 2 sentences. So on this table are the outputs for both ChatGPT 4.0 and the newest version of ChatGPT, which is 0.1. Here, I was pleasantly surprised that each system returned what I would consider to be a quality summary of each paper's key findings. I gave all of these systems, the summaries at least, a thumbs up for their quality. And just to put it to the test a little bit more, I also trialed another paper, which was a more technical paper of mine, to see what kind of summary it would give me for that technical paper. And again, I was very pleasantly surprised, as those summaries were just as good. Again, these are the systems, the AI systems, whereby you can only upload one article at a time to get one summary at a time. Also note that I was using the free versions of ChatGPT and of Claude, and with those free versions, I could only summarize one article per day. So if you are planning to incorporate these types of AI systems into your research workflow, you will need the paid versions in order to have them be as streamlined as possible, so you can use them when you need, and you're not restricted by the number of articles that you're summarizing per day. Next slide, please. I continued this same mini experiment with Claude Sonnet 3.5 and with Microsoft Copilot as well. Again, I was very happy with the quality of the AI-generated summaries. Now, of course, this mini experiment is representative of only a small sample size, right? So please do not overinterpret this mini experiment. If you input more technical articles from the basic science side of things, will it generate summaries that are just as good? I don't know. I haven't tried that yet, but I do encourage you to try it to see if you're pleased with the types of summaries that it's producing. On the next slide, Emily is going to share some cautionary tales and some examples of how AI summaries could at times be misleading and or misrepresent information.
All right, thanks, Adam. Yeah, so as Adam noted, he was overall pleased with the different summaries from ChatGPT 0.1, 4.0, Claude Sonnet, and Copilot. Nevertheless, though, whenever we're using generative AI to create summaries of works, we do want to be careful about some of the elements of risk and bias that might enter the equation. And in particular, we want to keep in mind the kinds of oversimplifications that might occur when using AI for summaries. And I'm going to talk about two kinds of oversimplification that occur. The first is exemplified by the screenshot on the left. It's something called simplification bias. And this is when we enter content into a generative AI tool or system, and we can see that the text is marked up in the sample. The first is a complex sentence, and then we see below its simplification by an earlier version of ChatGPT. This was ChatGPT 4. And the individual who conducted this study noted the incidences of these various linguistic phenomena, including paraphrases, deletions, or insertions. And depending upon the nature of your research, there's this possibility that through these different linguistic changes that it could render a summary less precise than one might want for their research or make it less useful. So that's simplification bias. The other tendency, especially when we upload a large text using tools like Adam spoke about with ChatGPT 4.0 or Claude Sonnet 3.5, is the tendency for the generative AI tools and systems to predominantly summarize the beginning and the ends of text. And this is often described as lost in the middle phenomenon, in which the middle of the text is largely omitted or significantly condensed in the summary output. I just want to mention a few other limitations that you might also encounter when you're trying to use tools like ChatGPT or Copilot for AI generated summaries. And these especially pertain to the use of digital scans of PDFs. And yet again, we conducted another mini experiment putting digital scans into 4 different systems, and we found that ChatGPT 4.0 performed the task quite adequately. Claude Sonnet was unable to do so. Copilot said that due to copyright considerations, it couldn't provide a verbatim summary or rendering of the text, but it did provide a brief summary. And then Gemini, Google's product, does not allow attachments, so we could not experiment with digital PDFs in Gemini at all. All right, so now we're going to return back to Adam, and he's going to talk more about AI tools for literature searches.
All right, so again, we were continuing on with this idea of let's do as many mini experiments as we can to just see what these systems can do and if they're going to be useful for us in our research processes. So this next mini experiment used AI systems from both buckets 4 and 5. And here we wanted to see whether the AI systems would return the same when we applied the exact same prompt across all the systems. So as an aside, Emily is working on a project exploring AI policies across US medical schools. So it made sense for us to use this particular topic in our prompt to hopefully get a number of different articles that we could use for our manuscript. And so you can see the prompt or query on the screen in front of you here. Again, this is involving AI policies across higher education and topics such as security concerns about AI use, AI literacy, etc. So this is the exact same prompt that we entered into all the various systems. Next slide, please. So here now are the outcomes of our queries. And let me first mention that we did not check whether these citations were real or not. So let that be a caveat. We did not go in and confirm the accuracy or the accuracy of these citations. Draw your attention first to the top of the screen where this yellow box is located. So I wanted a couple of baseline comparisons. In other words, I wanted us to be able to compare against a typical process that one might use. So for this typical classic search, I used Google Scholar, and then I also used a database called ERIC. The reason I chose ERIC instead of PubMed or CINAHL or Web of Science is because ERIC has a lot more educational studies for higher education in particular than do the other databases that I've mentioned. So that's why I selected ERIC as my other comparator. So between these two typical databases, Google Scholar and ERIC, you'll notice that neither of them returned the same top 3 results. So this is just a good reminder that in order to conduct a thorough, comprehensive search, it really is best practice to use multiple databases in order to get the articles that you're after. So now we'll turn our attention to the larger color coded box down below. And here we see the outcomes from the AI systems. Notice that only 2 studies appeared within the top 3 results across multiple AI systems. So the Chan 2023 paper appeared a couple of times, and so too did the Barnes 2024 paper. But again, we have this notion that even across these AI systems, the same citations are not being returned. So this suggests to me that these AI systems are using different algorithms and or different databases in order to locate and prioritize what they consider to be the most relevant articles. And if we go back to the Chan 2023 paper as an example, you'll notice that while Google Scholar was able to find that paper, in addition to a couple of the AI systems, notice that none of the AI systems were able to retrieve any of the same articles that the ERIC database returned. So again, the take-home message here for me is that it really is important to use a multifocal approach to your literature search so that you can get the best outcome, not only from your classic database searches, but also use a multifocal approach even across AI-assisted searches as well. That way you'll be certain to return the most relevant and most useful articles for your research purposes. Next slide. Okay, finally, here is bucket number 5. So bucket number 5 represents the most advanced of the AI literature search tools that are capable of a couple of things. They're capable of both searching the literature and returning relevant articles. In addition, they can also summarize all of these research articles, and they're doing this simultaneously. So the example that I have here on the screen is from SciSpace. Here I asked SciSpace to create an article summary table for the top 5 cited papers on the topic of educational escape rooms. And what I really like about SciSpace is this formatting and the output that it has in this table format. This table format really allows you to do a quick skim across all of the articles that were returned to determine which are going to meet your needs for your research project. You'll notice that the column headers here are just examples. So you see the column header called methods used and the one called results. You can have 15 to 20 different columns if you want, with limitations, with major findings, with major conclusions, with discussion points and themes, etc. So you can really have any heading here that you want to help you organize across multiple papers and to help you quickly screen and skim across a multitude of returned articles. In addition, this system also allows you to do some deeper dives. So you might notice that these summarized bullet points are a little bit superficial perhaps, but that's okay. You can simply ask the system to do a deeper dive. You can ask for more detailed information from the methods section, for example. In addition to asking for more summaries or more detailed summaries, you can also extract information in this system. And that is exciting to me because I do so many meta-analyses whereby we have to go into every single paper and extract information on sample sizes for the control group and the treatment group and means and standard deviations, etc. With this system, you can simply type into the prompt across all of the included papers, extract the sample sizes for the control group and treatment group. And then you can put sample size as your column heading, and within a few seconds, it will generate that information for you. Again, the caveat here is that I personally would still go back and check every single one of those papers to make sure that information was correct. But if it can return that to you and give you a starting point for what to look for, in my mind, it makes it a lot easier to find it in the paper. So in my opinion, overall, SciSpace is one of the most advanced AI systems for literature reviews, in addition to summaries of the articles. And of course, it's also very good for data extraction, for doing deep dives, for screening, etc. Now, if you are accustomed to using Covidence, for example, for screening and are doing screenings across multiple investigators, that's a whole different type of screening process, right? That is a formal screening process for a systematic review of the literature. The screening process I'm referring to here is just a visual screening of which articles are most relevant for your particular needs. All right, next slide, please. We're almost finished here, and then we'll have some time for questions as well. So as we wrap up this presentation, I do want to alert you to some of the advancements that are on the horizon and that are currently being beta tested. So it's not too surprising that large databases are also getting into the AI game. One example is JSTOR. So JSTOR was the first to start to pilot an interactive AI system that is directly embedded into the database's architecture. And so this beta system can summarize articles, it can find related topics and related articles, it can extract key information, etc. So all the same types of features we've been discussing along the way, this system can now do embedded within the database itself. So as you can imagine, as AI continues to evolve, I'm sure other commonly used databases like PubMed, Medline, CINAHL, Web of Science will start to get into the game very quickly. And actually, according to Emily, it looks like Web of Science is also starting to beta test the use of AI systems within their database architectures already. All right, I think I'll turn it back over to Emily to help round us out here.
All right, thanks, Adam. So as we talked a little about today, of course, generative AI may have the potential to augment research processes, but of course, we want to acknowledge some of the limitations and challenges inherent in generative AI use. And I'd like to start with the financial limitations. As we noted, many of the tools that we talked about today, such as ChatGPT or Sonnet, if you want to use them for more than a single query, then there's a subscription fee associated with it. And if we think about the multitude of subscription fees associated with different tools, it can become cost prohibitive. There's also the time in cognition component in the sense that, on the one hand, using some of these tools or systems might help augment your research workflow in the long term. But in the short term, there is, of course, that initial investment in familiarizing yourself with different tools and systems. And for some people, this might present a little bit of cognitive strain or overwhelm. There are broader questions about the nature of productivity in academic research and the fact that just the existence of these tools has brought about concerns that have been expressed in the scholarly literature that there will be even greater pressure to produce more research outputs. And then even more significantly, there's the question about what does all of this mean for disciplinary standards? And we're seeing a lot of discussions about what is the use of generative AI tools and the existence of these tools and systems mean for questions like authorship. And this is an aside, just in the last 2 weeks, one of the first articles was published by a graduate student saying that that individuals should be able to use ChatGPT or generative AI tools as a co-author. So that conversation has entered the scholarly domain. There's questions about originality and what does it mean if we use generative AI tools and to what extent can we use them? And of course, this opens up questions about methodological rigor. All right, I think Adam has a homework challenge for you all.
All right, so hopefully there was at least one system that maybe piqued your interest throughout this presentation. So hopefully you have that system in mind. What I would like you to do and challenge you to do is to investigate that system a little bit further on your own. So trial one of these, right? Go in, sign up for the free trial version and see if it could be useful for some of the typical research processes that you're accustomed to doing and see whether or not it's going to be applicable for your particular needs. Obviously, there's no way for us to have you turn this in per se, but I do hope that you'll take advantage of this opportunity to at least look into one tool that might benefit you in the long run and might help you to get better acquainted with AI and its current capabilities.
All right, and I'd like to end with 2 items. So first of all, I'd like to invite you all to please use the QR code, or I'll put the link in the chat so that you might give us feedback on this workshop and just let us know if this particular framing and the structuring with the buckets was useful in terms of a way for you to conceptualize the possibilities that these different tools and systems might provide. And this is helpful for us as we plan future workshops. And so related to that, we invite you to please save the date for upcoming workshops related to this extended discussion of what an AI augmented research workflow might entail. The next workshop will be on December 2nd, in which we'll discuss the use of data analysis and data visualization with generative AI tools and systems. And then finally, we'll round out the conversation in January with a discussion of what it might entail to use AI as your first peer reviewer. We'd like to thank you all for joining us today, and I'm going to put a resource in the chat that you can take with you and explore. It's a list of all the tools and systems that we discussed today, divided into their respective buckets, and there's details about the price of the tools. And I think we have time for questions.
Yeah, Joanne, if you just open up that link that Emily just shared, you'll have all the pricing that you could want.
Thank you very much. This is really informative for me. I haven't even begun to use these tools in my research.
Just as an aside, I have often found, this is Peg, I've often found if I ask the creator, they'll often give EDU accounts, either free or a free trial access, or even I've gotten free for a year, I've gotten free in perpetuity. It's sometimes they don't share that information up front, but if you ask, they'll give it to you.
That's good to know. I'll also add that oftentimes with the free trial accounts, while you might be restricted in some features, you typically have access to most of the features. Where the restriction comes in is how many tokens you can use at a time, right? So like, for example, I ran into the issue of only being able to upload one paper to summarize for ChatGPT and Claude per day instead of having an unlimited number that I could upload. All right,
Any other questions? Sorry, Anna. I know it's a lot to take in, so, but please, we're happy to take questions, and please note that if you would like more assistance with a specific tool, you can always reach out to Citi. I don't know, Adam, if you're open to questions as well.
Yep. And I'll go back to a question Emily asked at the forefront of this. Has anyone used AI in part of their research process to date? So Joanne, you mentioned you had not used any AI yet. Amarjeet or Tom, have you used AI at all?
No, Adam, I have not used it purely because of cost.
Yeah.
Anything free, I have used ChatGPT just to, explore some literature, but otherwise not for writing or anything like that. But my bigger concern is that with scientific literature in different domains, especially in our domain, some of the literature may not be accessible to these programs. So how complete is a literature search if these programs don't have access to some of the published literature that is, pretty much behind a paywall, which even libraries can't afford?
Yes, let me comment on that for a moment, because you're right that even though it may not be able to access the literature directly, that you're interested in from PubMed or elsewhere, for example. In the case of SciSpace, if you access the literature through your normal mechanism, you can still take those PDFs and upload them into SciSpace, and then it can still summarize for you. It can still dig in to extract the information, etc. So that's not as streamlined as maybe we would like it to be eventually, but it still allows a mechanism to get those PDFs and that information into the system to still use the system and its functionalities to maximize time efficiency.
Interesting point, but I just want to point out that by doing so, you may be violating some of the copyright because you are sharing PDFs, which you may not be allowed. I review a lot of grants, and we are explicitly told, do not upload anybody's grant into any of these programs, because once it's up there, it's out of your control. It becomes public domain.
Yeah, there's not much information on what happens once these uploads occur.
Yeah.
So it's a big black box right now.
Yeah.
I think Sarah makes a really good point that it's a good way to get started on any project, but it's never something that you would use verbatim.
That's
Right.
true. Adam, one other question about so like how accurate the information is. Have you tested out using the same prompt on different programs to see how close the response that you get back is to each other?
Yeah, that was part of our mini experiment with the summaries, for example. And all the summaries were what I would call sufficient, right? Like if I were to give this task to a handful of medical students and ask them to summarize the old-fashioned way, I felt like I would have gotten back just the same quality that I got from these systems.
No, I didn't mean that, you give them papers to summarize. I meant wider literature. So like give a prompt to say, write me a 500-word, summary of what is CRISPR.
We did not conduct that type of experiment per se, where we asked ChatGPT to write a certain prompt, or Genie AI, or whichever system. But you can imagine that the variability of the citations that it would return would be highly variable again across systems, if I would venture to guess.
That was my point. Yeah, there will be variability.
Yeah, so again, a big take home for me is that whether you're doing this the old-fashioned way or using AI assistance, you really do need to do your search across multiple systems to make it worthwhile.
So this is Sarah Ailey. I did a op-ed recently on teaching levels of prevention, which I was horrified with teaching. But I went into Copilot and said, well, how does levels of prevention deal with disability? And it came back to me that tertiary prevention, or that accessible transportation was tertiary prevention for people with disabilities. I said, so it does confirm my whatever, that this whole thing is ableist. But I found sometimes that like if I put in a subject into Copilot, it'll give me a fairly decent summary with headings, and will also sometimes reference literature that I wasn't familiar with that then I can go look at. So I find it's a good adjunct to what you're doing. I wouldn't use it, it by itself.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. Is I too think it's a great adjunct and supplement to normal research processes, but it's certainly not a replacement for those processes at this point in the process. All right, looks like we're at the top of the hour. So thank you again, everyone, for coming. We hope you enjoyed it. Hope you found it informative.
Thank
Nice
you.
work, everybody.
Thanks so much.
Good work.